All right, everybody, welcome back to the KSR YouTube channel. And as you saw in the thumbnail, we're doing some investigative work on SoccerMom, the transmission that it's in SoccerMom, or trying to figure out what our problem is with this transmission. So I'm gonna do a little bit of testing with some of the stuff that's in the car now, which I'll explain here in a minute after we get past the intro and get the car up on the lift on the dyno. We're gonna use the dyno to test our transmission. Yeah. So it's gonna be some data analysis and all kinds of stuff like that. Some of you guys really liked that in the other video that I did. So we're gonna do a little bit of that, as well as, you know, try and figure out what the next step is to take with our transmission. All right, so let's get back to the dyno and see what we can work out. All right, so we've got SoccerMom back here on the dyno. She got bugs all over her. Streetcar! Which, if you guys saw the last video where we took it out to the track to go hang out with Clay, that was kind of cool. We were supposed to try and get Clay a pass in it, but just didn't work out with the timing of me getting out there and whatnot. But so what we're gonna do on the dyno today is test our dump valve. Hopefully you can still hear me, but we have a valve that dumps the converter, the pressure in the torque converter to make the converter stall higher. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, little engine, big turbo, doesn't exactly spool the easiest, so we loosen the converter up by knocking the charge pressure out of it. And then it stalls higher, and then what we do is right after the launch, the old method was we close the dump valve so it refills the converter, and then the converter tightens up as all the power comes in. Well, when we had the issue during sick week where we decided to swap to Spencer's transmission, we decided to block off the dump valve just in case that it was a dump valve problem. Now, we probably could have tested our transmission first before we went through all the time and effort to take it out, but that's not what we did. We stuck the other transmission in here, and basically this right here is our dump valve. So this valve opens up and dumps the pressure down this line, and normally it goes and loops right back to this fitting right here. So basically just dumps that right back in there. Well, you see we put a cap on this one, and then we put a plug in the line. So for today, we're gonna run it like it is. Look at the converter charge pressure. Just make like a on wastegate kind of pass. I might even do it in low gear, like from a really low RPM or a really low wheel speed, to get the converter charge pressure through the pull. And I'll show you that data when we make the run, or after we make the run. We'll look at the data and we'll show you what the converter charge pressure trace does, and then we will hook that back up and do the same exact test again. Probably gonna make a little bit of a mess because obviously the fluid is fluid's pretty much all the way up to the top of the pan here. But we're gonna learn something. And if it turns out to be the dump valve is the source of the leak, well, then we can put our transmission back in. If it is not the dump valve, then something else has gotta happen. We're gonna have to call FTI and be like, what's going on? And that our transmission is not an FTI transmission, but it has some FTI parts in it that I bought through the years, you know, pump, all my clutches and stuff. When I go through and freshen the transmission, we get all that from them. But Spencer's gonna take this transmission back to them and swap the first gear, or really swap the planetary set to a 169 first gear instead of a 180 that's in it, because for his power level, the 180 or the 169 first gear is a much better gear setup. And that might be what we end up with in Soccer Mom. I don't know. We've got a 158 in Soccer Mom, which was a really good combo for the car when it was light. And we want to try that again with the converter charge pressure right to see how all that works out. Part of building these things, you got to try different things. So let's get this thing loaded up on the dyno, make a rip on, get it warmed up, make a couple of runs to get some data, and then unfortunately make a mess, but hopefully very quickly, and learn some more. All right, we're up inside of Soccer Mom. Never mind. Let's see how she cranks up this morning. Dang it, I still got to adjust that. But boy, she kicked off quick. Yeah, she did. Still got to mess with that after starting in Richmond, I think, for to get it to not stumble down there. But yeah, she cranked up pretty nice. EGTs are all up pretty good. Cool. All right, back her up on the dyno. So I did, the other night, I actually messed around with this thing off camera. I put some street plugs back in it, and number 7 and number 8 were running several hundred degrees, well several, I'd say about 200 degrees cooler than the other 6. So I did some individual cylinder tuning that we can do with Holly to mess around with those to try to get them worked out right. Basically change the individual cylinder tuning from part throttle to what is happening wide open throttle. And maybe I'll show some of that in the data too. That's a change we've made, because like typically the only time we look at spark plugs is when we're making wide open rips and then we're reading the spark plug for the fueling, but that's not something we're adjusting for the idling and for light throttle stuff. And it's totally different what an engine may want just based off of, intake harmonics and stuff that very well educated people in the Society of Automotive Engineers have spent a lot more time researching than I have. I'm just winging it based off the EGTs and fuel delivery and assuming that all the injectors flow exactly the same and just winging it. But it seems to be working. So let's get this thing strapped down and see if we can make a pull. Down real good and tight. Got 4 straps on the back because, like I said, I think I'm going to try it in low gear and actually shift it just to get some kind of data for that we can try and duplicate. Hopefully it doesn't spin, but if it does, it does. We'll figure out how to work around it. All right, so I came and plugged into the computer, changed my boost to boost by RPM, so you can see it's gonna should get to about 4,500 on the converter, and then it'll ramp up and make 10 psi of dome. The individual cylinder tuning I was telling you guys about is over here, so you can see we have tables now for each individual cylinder. So like for number 1, this is fueling. Out of number 1, I'm pulling 8% at idle, and then I blend that out by like 1,700 RPM. And each cylinder is a little bit different to kind of balance the EGTs out. See, this one's actually removing on the bottom and then adding up top, because I saw or not up top, but at you know, the 1700, 2000, 2300 RPM ranges, because I noticed that that cylinder went like really hot once I started cruising. So I threw a little bit of fuel at it while it was, you know, in that area of the tune, because tune is, you know, somewhere down in here depending on how fast we're going. And then up here I saved our old global files. This is basically where the car runs at wide open throttle. That's everywhere from 20 pounds of boost on up, which I think I may even blend that down here so that if I get into it today, it'll all be the same. Yeah, let's just do this. Cool. So I'm gonna go through and change some of the other ones to make sure that all kind of balances out. We have the street plugs back in this thing, and like I said, we're just making low boost passes today because really we're only looking for that converter charge pressure data so that we can then do our dump valve test and then figure out what we're gonna do from there. So do a little bit of work. Let's make a dyno pool. Beautiful trace here. We're gonna click over and look at, let's see, transmission converter charge pressure. All right, so converter charge pressure data. See, we've got it right there. Back here, it's 117. Comes down and settles on like 104. When it's trying to couple, you can see the, like right after the shift, spikes pretty high up to 137, which may be a little high. But then as we're going out toward, this is the converter charge pressure here. You see it's falling a little bit. This is transmission line pressure, pretty steady at like 240-ish PSI. 238, 246, 242, 249. So I'm actually gonna get rid of that. And then this line down here is boost. You definitely see I still have some work to do in tuning the PIDs, but I'm not really worried about that today. So that was, let's see, 11 PSI there, 10.4, 10.8, 12.1. So I definitely need to do some work there. But we got the data that we're looking for. With our converter charge pressure data, it's kind of close to 100 PSI on the dyno. And I believe going down track it was, which I've got other data, maybe I'll go and compare it to, but going down the track it was like 76, I think, out towards the finish line. So now we're gonna go down and hook that line up, hopefully not make too much of a mess, hook that line up and do this again. Now that I got the fluid nice and warm, and it's 113 degrees, just gotta do it. So, here we go. All right, let's see if we can do this without making a huge mess. Not too bad. Oh, damn. You all right?
Honestly, not really, but I'm hanging in there.
Will's nursing a sore back this morning. So I guess I'm gonna crack this loose just to see what happens.
So in theory, if that dump valve's working, there shouldn't really be any fluid in there.
No, this should be...
I mean, it should be closed off, so whatever potentially could be in that line, I guess.
Just a little tiny, like it's probably still a little bit in the line, which I wonder if It's not cold, but it's not hot. So
You want me to take this off and then you...
yeah, if you wanna take that off,
Yeah, it's on.
I would prefer not to get a face full of it, but let me know when you're about to bust it off.
I can hold the pan, that way you can use both hands.
Okay.
I think it's getting close. Alright.
Ready?
Yep.
Ready to go?
1, 2, 3, go!
Oh yeah!
Damn, boy! Good job. Of course, neither one of us remember to grab a rag.
Yeah.
Ooh, that don't smell good, do it?
I don't know if this fluid has ever smelled all that great.
True.
That twisted up. Alright, for that little bit of leakage, not even a real need to top off the fluid. Like, it's going to do what we need to do for the test. And if we see some kind of verified results, the next move is taking this transmission out. We got to give it back to Spencer. Thanks, Spencer. All right, so I cooled the transmission off with a fan underneath it so that we can try to make a perfectly comparable test to the one we did before. The only difference is the dump valve being hooked up but not turned on. So this whole test is to see if our dump valve is bleeding off pressure back into the pan. Data is downloading. The temperature was within 2 degrees on the transmission temperature. Turbo's still spinning. It's spinning. Power numbers are like almost identical. Showing a different spike there, but that's just the spike where I shifted. But pretty much laying over right up top. Similar, but maybe a little different. I guess let's go look at some data. Okay, I have a data log to look at. Let's go look at it. Alright, so here's the verdict. Oh yay, look, that's different. Except that's only 3 PSI. What we were hoping to see was like 30 to 40 PSI because that was the difference in one transmission to the other. So with our other transmission during a run, I'll show you guys the data, like the on-track data. Because obviously that's where we're trying to go fast. We're not trying to go fast on the dyno. But this was a really good test. You can see I missed my shift point a little bit. We spun her up to 7,500 on the second run. First run was 7,300. But same boost basically, but unfortunately we have to look deeper into our problem. That's race cars, unfortunately. Sometimes you have to take a step backwards to refigure something out, and we have kind of been chasing an issue with our torque converters that wasn't the torque converter's fault. The torque converter isn't fully full of fluid. Say that a few times back to back fast. it's not going to perform as if it has the proper amount of fluid. So we would send our converter out and get it tightened up, and it would still come back and have this ugly flare in it in low gear. And then when we really started trying to go fast, it had a flare in high gear too. You could tell that the RPM would come up and the G meter would fall down because it was basically, let's call it slipping the clutch worse. You know, it's like a hydraulic clutch if you want to think about a high stall torque converter. Sure, that's a fair way to call it. I think it's basically a hydraulic clutch. So basically, we've kind of got to go back to square one on our transmission, and I'm going to call FTI when I get, while I'm on the road to go get my kids this afternoon. Call FTI and tell them what we've got going on, tell them some of our data, and then probably send our transmission down there and let them dyno it and see what all, you know, they can figure out to make the thing have the proper converter charge pressure. Because this is the kind of data we need. We need, like, you know, around that 80 to 100 PSI on the dyno, and that translates into 70 to 80 PSI going down the racetrack. For whatever reason, it's a little bit different on the dyno, but the old transmission was like 30 to 40 on the dyno, and then closer to 30 on the racetrack. Anyways, a lot of jibber jabbering. Thanks for following along. Thanks for subscribing. See you guys next time.